Woman calls police on black girl selling water. Faces massive backlash. The scorching summer sun beat down mercilessly on the corner of Maple and Elm Street, where 9-year-old Ava Jordan was meticulously arranging water bottles in her red and white cooler. Beads of sweat trickled down her forehead as she positioned her mother's bright pink beach umbrella at just the right angle to create a patch of shade. The temperature had already climbed to 95 degrees by noon, and the weatherman had promised it would only get hotter. Ava's small hands trembled with excitement as she finished writing the last letter on her cardboard sign. She had spent the entire morning decorating it with sparkly markers, making sure each letter in Water $1 was perfectly visible from the street. The sign, much like its creator, radiated an infectious enthusiasm that seemed to brighten the already sun-drenched corner. From their third-floor apartment window, LaToya Jordan watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and mild concern. She had always encouraged Ava's entrepreneurial spirit, but the protective mother in her couldn't help but keep a watchful eye. The neighborhood was generally safe. They'd lived there for 5 years without incident, and most of their neighbors were friendly, always greeting them with warm smiles and genuine interest in Ava's latest adventures. The business idea had come to Ava 3 weeks ago when she overheard her cousins talking about their upcoming trip to Adventure World, the newly renovated amusement park just outside the city. The park had recently installed a massive roller coaster called the Thunderbolt, and Ava's cousins couldn't stop talking about it. When they invited her to join them, Ava's heart soared, until she realized the ticket price was well beyond her modest allowance savings. That evening, over a dinner of mac and cheese, Ava's favorite, she had presented her mother with a carefully thought-out business plan, complete with crayon drawings of her proposed water stand. LaToya had to bite back a smile as her daughter seriously explained profit margins and customer service strategies she'd learned from watching YouTube videos about young entrepreneurs. "Mom, I did the math," Ava had said, pushing her glasses up her nose with determination. "If I sell each bottle for $1 and the pack of 24 bottles costs $5, that means..." She scrunched up her face, calculating in her head. "That means I make $19 for every pack I sell." LaToya had gently corrected her math, explaining about the cost of ice and the importance of accounting for all expenses, but she couldn't have been prouder of her daughter's initiative. They had spent the next few days preparing, with LaToya taking Ava to the wholesale club to buy cases of water and helping her make change for larger bills. Now, watching from above, LaToya smiled as the first customers began to stop at Ava's stand. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, always an early riser despite her advanced age, was the first to approach. The elderly woman had watched Ava grow up and never missed an opportunity to support her various ventures, from Girl Scout cookies to school fundraisers. "Agua frescas," Mrs. Rodriguez called out, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. "Just what we need on a day like this, mi amor." She pulled a crisp $5 bill from her purse and insisted Ava keep the change, despite the young girl's protests about proper business practices. As the morning wore on, more neighbors stopped by. Mr. Thompson, the high school basketball coach, bought 3 bottles for his team's practice. The mail carrier, dripping with sweat, gratefully purchased 2. Even the usually grumpy Mr. Chin from the corner store bought a bottle, nodding approvingly at Ava's entrepreneurial spirit. The scene was picturesque, a snapshot of community life at its finest. Children rode past on bicycles, some stopping to chat with Ava about her amusement park dreams. Young professionals power walking to the subway station paused to buy water and compliment her initiative. The summer air buzzed with possibility and promise. But not everyone viewed the scene with the same warmth. From her recently purchased townhouse across the street, Allison Parker watched the growing crowd with mounting irritation. She had moved to the neighborhood 6 months ago, attracted by the rising property values and what the real estate agent had called an upcoming area with great potential. Allison considered herself a person of principle, someone who believed in rules and proper procedures. The sight of an unsupervised child running what she deemed an illegal business operation grated on her nerves. She had already complained to the Homeowners Association about children playing basketball in the street and dogs being walked without proper city-issued tags. This water stand situation, in her mind, was yet another example of the neighborhood's declining standards. The breaking point came when a group of teenagers, laughing and joking loudly, gathered around Ava's stand. Their voices carried across the street, disrupting Allison's attempt to work from home. She watched as they playfully argued over who would pay for whose water, their boisterous energy adding to the street's lively atmosphere. For Allison, it was the last straw. She had moved to this neighborhood for peace and quiet, not to listen to what she considered chaos. Rising from her desk with determined purpose, she grabbed her phone and headed downstairs. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she approached the water stand, each step fueled by self-righteous indignation. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees as Allison's shadow fell across Ava's carefully arranged display. The young girl looked up, her bright smile faltering slightly at the stern expression on the woman's face. The teenagers, sensing the shift in atmosphere, quickly dispersed, leaving their empty water bottles in Ava's recycling box. "Excuse me," Allison's voice cut through the cheerful ambience, like a frost through summer flowers. "Do you have a permit for this operation?" The afternoon heat seemed to intensify as Ava stared up at the towering figure before her, confusion clouding her usually bright eyes. Her small hands clutched the edge of her cooler, condensation mixing with a nervous sweat on her palms. The words "permit" hung in the air between them, as foreign to the 9-year-old as the concept of needing permission to help people stay hydrated on a scorching summer day. Ava's voice trembled as she responded, I don't know what that is, ma'am." Her eyes darted toward her apartment building, searching for her mother's familiar silhouette in the window. The cheerful atmosphere that had surrounded her small enterprise moments ago had evaporated like water on hot concrete. Allison Parker's lips pressed into a thin line as she pulled out her phone, her manicured fingers moving with practiced precision. The device felt like a weapon in her hands, and in many ways, it was about to become one. "Well, then, I'm afraid I'll have to report this. We can't have unlicensed vendors setting up shop wherever they please. There are rules for a reason." The sound of her dialing 911 seemed to echo across the suddenly quiet street. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had lingered nearby after buying her water, stepped forward with concern etched on her weathered face, but Allison raised a hand to silence any potential intervention. "Yes, hello? I'd like to report an illegal vendor on the corner of Maple and Elm," Allison spoke into the phone, her voice carrying the sharp edge of authority. "It's a child selling water, without proper permits or supervision." "Yes, I'll hold." From her vantage point upstairs, LaToya had been watching the interaction unfold with growing alarm. Her maternal instincts, already on high alert, screamed into action as she saw her daughter's body language shift from confident entrepreneur to frightened child. She abandoned her laptop mid-email, her chair scraping against the floor as she rushed to the door. The 3 flights of stairs had never seemed longer as LaToya descended them 2 at a time, her heart pounding not just from the exertion but from a familiar fear, the fear every Black parent carries when their child encounters authority figures or those who would summon them. Her phone was already in her hand, video recording activated before she even pushed through the building's heavy front door. The summer air hit her like a wall of heat as she emerged onto the street, but LaToya barely noticed. Her focus was entirely on the scene before her, her daughter, small and vulnerable, shrinking beneath the shadow of a woman who had decided to weaponize her privilege on a sweltering summer afternoon. "Excuse me," LaToya's voice cut through the tension, steady despite the anger bubbling beneath her carefully controlled tone. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Allison turned, phone still pressed to her ear, her expression shifting from righteous indignation to momentary surprise before settling into defensive hostility. "I'm reporting an illegal business operation. Your daughter needs proper permits, and you're calling the police on a 9-year-old child for selling water?" LaToya interrupted, her phone raised to capture the interaction. The absurdity of the situation might have been laughable if it weren't so potentially dangerous. On a day hot enough to fry an egg on the sidewalk, you're taking issue with a little girl trying to help people stay hydrated? The confrontation drew the attention of nearby residents. Windows opened, heads poked out, and people on the street slowed their pace to watch. Mr. Thompson, who had bought water earlier, stepped closer, his tall frame and coach's presence adding a silent support to LaToya and Ava. Allison, now fully aware she was being recorded, attempted to shield her face with her free hand while maintaining her position. "This isn't about the water," she insisted, her voice rising an octave. "This is about following proper procedures. What kind of example are we setting if we just let anyone set up shop wherever they want?" "The example we're setting?" LaToya's laugh was sharp and without humor. "Let me tell you about examples. My daughter saw a goal, wanting to go to an amusement park with her cousins, and instead of asking for handouts, she came up with a business plan. She learned about profit margins, customer service, and hard work. She's showing initiative and entrepreneurship, but you're so caught up in your need to control and police that you can't see the positive impact she's having on this community." As if to emphasize her point, a young jogger approached, dripping with sweat, and attempted to buy a water bottle. Allison stepped between him and the cooler, causing him to back away with his hands raised in confusion. "Mom?" Ava's small voice caught LaToya's attention. "Should I pack up?" Her daughter's eyes were wide with uncertainty, hands hovering over the cooler she had so proudly stocked just hours before. The moment crystallized everything wrong with the situation. Here was a child learning her first harsh lesson about how the world sometimes views Black ambition, Black success, Black existence. LaToya felt the weight of this moment, knowing it would leave an indelible mark on her daughter's understanding of the world. "No, baby," LaToya said firmly, her eyes never leaving Allison. "You don't need to pack up. You're not doing anything wrong." She raised her phone higher, ensuring she captured every second of the interaction. "And the whole world is going to see exactly what's happening here today." The dispatcher's voice could be faintly heard through Allison's phone, asking for clarification about the nature of the emergency. The word emergency hung in the air, highlighting the absurdity of the situation. In the background, Mrs. Rodriguez had begun making calls of her own, her rapid-fire Spanish adding to the growing chorus of community response. The sun continued its relentless beatdown on the corner of Maple and Elm, but now it illuminated a scene that would soon capture national attention. As LaToya's finger pressed the post button on her social media account, she had no way of knowing that her video would become a catalyst for a larger conversation about race, privilege, and the policing of Black childhood in America. The video spread across social media platforms with the speed and intensity of a summer wildfire. By sunset, LaToya's phone had become a constant stream of notifications, likes, shares, comments, and messages from people across the country. Her initial post, hastily captioned with trembling fingers, had struck a nerve that resonated far beyond their neighborhood's boundaries. That evening, as Ava helped put away the unsold water bottles, still a successful day's sales, despite the interruption, she struggled to understand why her small business venture had caused such a commotion. LaToya found herself trying to explain concepts no mother wants to discuss with her 9-year-old: racial profiling, privilege, and the weight of existing in a skin color that some people viewed as inherently suspicious. "But Mom," Ava said, her voice small as she arranged the bottles in their refrigerator, "Mrs. Rodriguez sells tamales from her kitchen every weekend. Nobody calls the police on her." The observation, innocent yet piercing in its clarity, made LaToya pause. She pulled her daughter close, inhaling the scent of sunshine and strawberry shampoo that still clung to her hair. "Sometimes, baby, people see what they want to see. Mrs. Rodriguez's tamales are a neighborhood tradition. But when they saw you out there, some people saw something different." By midnight, the video had been picked up by several major news outlets. Social media users had already dubbed Allison Permit Patty, a name that would follow her long after the initial incident. Hashtags multiplied like bacteria in a petri dish. Hashtag Permit Patty, hashtag WaterWildBlack, hashtag Let Kids Be Kids. Each repost added another layer of commentary, another perspective on the incident that had transformed their quiet corner into ground zero for a national conversation. Across the street, Allison Parker sat in her darkened townhouse, watching her own life unravel through the bright screen of her phone. The first wave of messages had started as a trickle, concerned friends sharing the video, asking if it was really her. By midnight, that trickle had become a tsunami of public outrage. Her social media accounts were flooded with comments ranging from disappointed to threatening. Her LinkedIn profile was being shared across platforms, with calls for her employer to take action. She tried drafting explanations, apologies, justifications, deleting each one before posting. How could she explain that it wasn't about race? That she genuinely believed in following proper procedures? That she had moved to this neighborhood seeking order and stability, not to become the internet's latest villain? Each attempted explanation felt hollow, even to her own ears. The morning brought no relief. Allison's walk to work, usually a peaceful 20-minute stroll, became a gauntlet of suspicious glances and whispered conversations. She felt exposed, as if the viral video had stripped away her privacy and painted a target on her back. At the advertising agency where she worked as a senior account manager, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Her colleagues, usually eager to discuss weekend plans over morning coffee, avoided eye contact. The conference room fell silent when she entered for the morning meeting. By lunchtime, her supervisor had called her into his office, his expression grave as he closed the door behind them. "Allison," he began, shuffling papers on his desk without looking at them. "We need to discuss the situation." The word situation carried the weight of millions of views, thousands of angry comments, and dozens of calls to the agency demanding action. "Our clients are expressing concerns." The agency's reputation. She knew where this was heading before he finished his sentence. In the age of viral outrage, companies couldn't afford to be associated with controversy. Her 15 years of experience, her perfect performance reviews, her dedication to the job, none of it mattered in the face of a 5-minute video that had branded her as the embodiment of racial privilege gone wrong. Meanwhile, back in their apartment, LaToya was dealing with her own overwhelming response to the video's virality. Her phone had become a portal to both support and scrutiny. Journalists wanted interviews, activists wanted statements, and social media influencers wanted to collaborate. Some praised her for standing up for her daughter, while others criticized her for exposing a child to public attention. Ava, caught in the eye of the storm, showed remarkable resilience. She insisted on setting up her water stand again the next day, though LaToya noticed her daughter's eyes now darted nervously at approaching strangers. The community rallied around them. Neighbors took turns sitting nearby, offering silent support and watchful presence. Mrs. Rodriguez brought her famous tamales to share, creating an impromptu street fair atmosphere that helped ease the tension. Local news vans began appearing on their street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers seeking sun. Reporters practiced their stand-ups on the corner where Ava's water stand had stood, each trying to find a fresh angle on a story that had captured the nation's attention. In a neighborhood that prides itself on diversity and community, one reporter intoned into her microphone, "A simple act of childhood entrepreneurship has sparked a national debate about privilege, prejudice, and the policing of public spaces." Behind me is where 9-year-old Ava Jordan. The story took on a life of its own, morphing and evolving with each retelling. News channels ran split-screen debates between social commentators arguing about the deeper implications of the incident. Some defended Allison's right to question unlicensed vendors, while others pointed to a pattern of weaponizing police against people of color. Ava's water stand had become a symbol, a flashpoint in the ongoing national conversation about race and privilege. Local business owners began reaching out to LaToya, offering support in ways that surprised and touched her. The owner of Sweet Dreams Ice Cream Shop created a special Ava's Entrepreneurial Spirit Sunday, with proceeds going to a college fund for Ava. The hardware store donated a professional-grade canopy to replace the pink beach umbrella. Even Mr. Chin, typically reserved and business-minded, put up a sign in his store window reading, "Young entrepreneurs welcome here." But the attention brought complications. LaToya found herself struggling to maintain normalcy in their lives while managing the constant requests for interviews and appearances. She had to take time off from her job as a dental hygienist to handle the media attention, carefully selecting which interviews to accept and which to decline. Her primary concern remained protecting Ava from the darker aspects of their sudden fame. "Mom," Ava asked one evening as they sat on their small balcony, sharing a plate of Mrs. Rodriguez's tamales, "why do some people keep saying I'm a victim? I don't feel like a victim. I made over $200 selling water, and now people know about real problems." Isn't that good? LaToya wrapped an arm around her daughter, marveling at her wisdom. Baby, sometimes the world takes our stories and makes them about bigger things. You're right, you're not a victim. You're a smart, brave girl who showed everyone what it means to work hard and stay strong, even when things get tough. Across the street, Allison's life had become increasingly isolated. After losing her job, she rarely left her townhouse, having groceries delivered and working remotely on freelance projects. The constant stream of hate mail and death threats had forced her to change her phone number and email address. Her once active social media presence had been reduced to a series of deactivated accounts and apologetic statements that seemed to satisfy no one. One morning, about 3 weeks after the incident, Allison stood at her window, watching as Ava set up her now thriving business. The water stand had evolved. There was a proper tent now, a digital payment system, and even a small line of regular customers. She noticed how the girl had grown more confident, standing straighter, speaking with more authority. The transformation made Allison's stomach churn with a mixture of shame and regret. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her phone, not to call the police this time, but to write an email to LaToya. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for several minutes before she began typing. Dear LaToya, I've spent weeks trying to find the right words to express my remorse for my actions that day. Everything I've drafted sounds hollow and inadequate, but I need to try. Would you be willing to meet with me? Not for the cameras or social media, but as two human beings who share a community. I understand if you decline, but I hope you'll give me the chance to apologize in person, particularly to Ava. The email sat in her drafts folder for 2 days before she finally gathered the courage to hit send. When LaToya's response came, it was brief but opened a door. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Unity Park. Just us. The meeting place was symbolic. Unity Park had been created 5 years earlier as a community gathering space, its design specifically intended to bring together the neighborhood's diverse population. On that morning, the park was quiet except for the distant laughter of children on the playground and the gentle splash of the central fountain. LaToya arrived first, choosing a bench near the rose garden. She watched as Allison approached, noting how different she looked from the confrontational woman in the viral video. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a t-shirt, her carefully styled hair now pulled back in a basic ponytail. The transformation wasn't just physical. There was a hesitancy in her step, a humility that hadn't been there before. Thank you for meeting with me, Allison began, her voice barely above a whisper. She remained standing, as if unsure whether she had permission to sit. I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of reading, and even more learning. Sit, LaToya said, gesturing to the empty space beside her. The morning sun filtered through the park's maple trees, creating shifting patterns on the ground between them. For a moment, neither woman spoke, letting the weight of the past weeks settle around them like fallen leaves. Allison lowered herself onto the bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've been reading about the history of policing in America, she continued, her voice steadier now, about how seemingly neutral laws and regulations have been used as tools of oppression. I never saw myself as part of that system, but that day, that's exactly what I became. LaToya studied the woman beside her, remembering the righteous anger in her voice as she'd called the police. The contrast between that moment and now was stark. What made you finally see it? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. My sister sent me an old photo, Allison replied, pulling out her phone. She opened an image of 2 young girls at what appeared to be a lemonade stand. This is me and my best friend Jennifer, age 10. We used to set up a stand every summer. No permits, no questions asked. The only difference, her voice trailed off. The only difference was the color of your skin, LaToya finished quietly. Their conversation continued for over an hour, touching on personal experiences, systemic inequalities, and the power of unconscious bias. As they talked, the morning sun climbed higher, and the park began to fill with its usual visitors, mothers with strollers, elderly couples on their daily walks, children racing to the playground. Meanwhile, Ava had transformed her water stand into something bigger than either woman could have imagined. With the help of her mother's friend who taught business at the local community college, she had developed Young Entrepreneurs United, a program that helped other kids start their own small businesses. Every Saturday, the corner of Maple and Elm now hosted a mini market where children sold everything from homemade bookmarks to organic dog treats. The program attracted attention from local politicians and business leaders. The city council, responding to public pressure, created a Young Entrepreneurs Permit, a simplified licensing process for children under 16. The permit was free, easy to obtain, and came with basic business education materials. They named it the Ava Jordan Initiative. Allison, though still dealing with the aftermath of her actions, found unexpected purpose in her fall from grace. She began volunteering with a racial justice organization, sharing her story as an example of how unconscious bias can manifest in seemingly mundane situations. Her background in advertising proved valuable as she helped develop educational campaigns about privilege and prejudice. The hardest part, she told a group of business leaders at a diversity workshop 6 months later, wasn't losing my job or facing public criticism. It was confronting my own prejudices, the ones I didn't even know I had. We all want to believe we're good people, but being good isn't enough. We have to be willing to learn, to change, to do better. 1 year after the incident, the corner of Maple and Elm had become a symbol of community transformation. Ava's water stand had evolved into a proper kiosk, co-managed by a rotating group of young entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. The profits funded scholarships for children who wanted to start their own businesses, but lacked the resources. LaToya watched her daughter grow into her role as a young community leader, her initial fear gradually replaced by pride. Ava's experience had shaped her, but not in the way many might have expected. Instead of learning to be afraid or bitter, she had learned the power of turning negative situations into opportunities for positive change. On the anniversary of the viral video, the community organized a street festival celebrating young entrepreneurs. The event, which spread across several blocks, featured children's businesses, educational workshops, and community resources. Mrs. Rodriguez's Tamales had their own booth, now officially licensed and helping fund cooking classes for neighborhood youth. As Ava cut the ribbon to officially open the festival, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Allison stood at the back, not drawing attention to herself but present, bearing witness to the transformation her actions had inadvertently sparked. Their eyes met briefly, and Ava gave a small nod, not quite forgiveness, but acknowledgement of the complex journey that had brought them all to this moment. Sometimes, Ava said in her short speech, reading from note cards she had carefully prepared, the worst days can lead to the best changes. My water stand was just the beginning. Look at us now, we're not just selling water or cookies or crafts. We're building bridges, creating opportunities, and showing that when we work together, everyone wins. The crowd applauded, and as the festivities began, the summer air filled with the sounds of laughter, music, and the bustling energy of commerce. The temperature was just as high as it had been that fateful day a year ago, but this time, the heat brought people together instead of driving them apart. Later that evening, as LaToya helped Ava count the day's proceeds, all going to the Young Entrepreneurs United Scholarship Fund, she marveled at how a moment that could have broken their spirit had instead strengthened their community. The incident had exposed ugly truths about prejudice and privilege, but it had also revealed the capacity for growth, forgiveness, and positive change. Mom, Ava said, carefully organizing bills into neat piles, do you think things would be different if I hadn't set up my water stand that day? LaToya pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of sunshine and success. Things are different because you didn't let one bad moment stop you from being who you are. You turned water into wisdom, baby girl. And that's worth more than all the permits in the world. The success of the Young Entrepreneurs United program spread beyond their neighborhood, catching the attention of national media for a different reason this time. Major business magazines featured Ava's story not as a cautionary tale about racial bias, but as an inspiration for youth entrepreneurship programs across the country. Cities from Seattle to Miami began implementing their own versions of the Ava Jordan Initiative, each adapted to their local community's needs. On a crisp autumn morning, 2 years after the incident, Ava stood before the state legislature, her voice steady as she testified in support of a bill to protect and encourage young entrepreneurs. At 11 years old, she had grown taller, more confident, but maintained the same bright spirit that had inspired her first business venture. "When I started selling water, I just wanted to go to an amusement park," she told the assembled lawmakers, her prepared speech resting untouched on the podium before her. "But life gave me a different kind of ride, one that taught me more than any roller coaster could. It taught me that sometimes the biggest obstacles can become the best opportunities." LaToya, sitting in the gallery, felt tears welling in her eyes as she watched her daughter command the attention of the room. The past 2 years had changed them both. She had left her job at the dental office to become the executive director of Young Entrepreneurs United, which had grown into a registered nonprofit organization with chapters in 12 states. The legislation passed unanimously, becoming known as the Youth Enterprise Protection Act. It established clear guidelines for young entrepreneurs while protecting them from discrimination and overregulation. More importantly, it required diversity training for law enforcement and public officials dealing with youth businesses. Allison Parker had also found her path forward. After months of self-reflection and community service, she had earned a master's degree in social justice education and now conducted workshops for corporations on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias. Her own experience had become a powerful teaching tool, though she was careful to never center herself in the narrative or seek acclaim for her transformation. One day, as autumn leaves painted the neighborhood in shades of gold and crimson, Allison received an unexpected invitation. Ava was organizing a conference for young entrepreneurs, and she wanted Allison to speak, not about the incident, but about the importance of learning from mistakes and working toward genuine change. The conference was held at the community center, now renamed the Unity Enterprise Center. As Allison approached the podium, she saw familiar faces in the audience: Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Chun, Coach Thompson, and dozens of others who had been present that scorching summer day. But instead of judgment, their expressions held something different: acceptance, if not quite forgiveness. "Change," Allison began, her voice steady, "isn't just about acknowledging our mistakes. It's about doing the hard work to ensure those mistakes become stepping stones to a better future." She paused, looking at Ava, who sat in the front row. "Some of our greatest teachers are those we once tried to silence." The conference became an annual event, drawing participants from across the country. Each year, young entrepreneurs shared their stories, learned from mentors, and built networks that transcended racial and economic barriers. The corner of Maple and Elm, where it all began, became known as Opportunity Corner, with a small plaque commemorating the water stand that sparked a movement. 3 years after the viral video, Ava finally made it to Adventure World. But instead of going with just her cousins, she led a group of 50 young entrepreneurs, beneficiaries of the scholarship program she had helped create. As they stood in line for the Thunderbolt, comparing business ideas and sharing dreams, Ava realized that her original goal had been far too small. "You know, it's funny, Mom," she said as they watched the children excitedly enter the park. "I thought selling water was just about getting here, but it was really about finding out where I needed to be." LaToya squeezed her daughter's hand, understanding perfectly. The incident that could have taught Ava to be afraid had instead taught her to be bold, to transform obstacles into opportunities, and to help others do the same. The video that had once divided their community had ultimately helped unite it, creating ripples of change that continued to spread. As the sun set on Adventure World, painting the sky in brilliant shades of purple and orange, Ava stood at the park's highest point, surrounded by the next generation of young entrepreneurs. Below them, the lights of the park began to twinkle like stars, and the distant sound of laughter and excitement filled the air. It was a moment of pure joy, unmarred by the memory of that hot summer day that had started it all. Sometimes, Ava whispered to herself, echoing the words she had heard her mother say so many times, "The world takes our stories and makes them about bigger things." But sometimes, that's exactly what needs to happen. And there, under the fading light of day, surrounded by the future she had helped create, Ava Jordan understood that her simple water stand had never really been about water at all. It had been about courage, community, and the power of turning life's bitter moments into something sweet. One opportunity, one lesson, and one changed mind at a time.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.